Hello, everyone. It's really cool to see so many familiar faces, a lot of graduates of Stitching Towards Discovery. And yeah, I actually have kind of good news about for all of you graduates that we're going to be starting in January 26th. We're going to start a graduate workshop for people who have taken Promptopia and Stitching Towards Discovery. I'm calling it the Stitchers Salon, and we'll meet once a month. And there will be speakers and prompts and consults and opportunities for conversation and small group interactions, all kinds of good stuff that's coming in January of 26. But that's kind of an aside. Welcome to the Big Tada for Stitching Towards Discovery 2025. And I am just going to get the program started. This is this is the fourth Big Tada. We started this class in 2021, and life has changed a lot since 2021. And that year, we were coming out of lockdown from the coronavirus, and people had a lot more time um, to work on their quilts. It was a really different time. And, the last few years, we just keep getting busier and busier and busier. And I think it's harder for students to commit to making 4 to 6 new compositions within a 6 month period, which is why the work that these students have done is so impressive. And I should also say that because of the different world we live in, and because of all of the obligations and deadlines and work and family and everything that people sort of have to navigate while they're also trying to create new work, that these presentations are a little different than ones that we've had in the past, in that some of them are really about the progress and growth that the student made during the 6 month period, which is not necessarily all evidenced in the quilts. So I will let the students talk, and it's going to be very exciting. So a couple of things before we begin the presentations. Elizabeth, who is my moderator, those of you who have taken classes with me before, virtual classes, you are familiar with Elizabeth, and she navigates all of the technology, and she has all of you muted. So that will give us a really good, clear recording. But it also means you can't like talk or applaud or laugh, which is kind of unfortunate that we can't do both. But the you can put your comments, especially your good comments, in the chat, and encouragement or anything you want to say, you can put it in the chat, but viewers won't be speaking during this presentation. I want to make two quick announcements. One is that next year, in addition to doing the Stitcher Salon for the graduates of Stitching Towards Discovery and Proptopia, I'm launching another new 6 month long workshop, which will replace Stitching Towards Discovery. What I've found over the years is that many students are afraid of Stitching Towards Discovery, and that they would like something that is more grounded in an educational experience. And I am calling that class Improv Ed, which also spells improved. So it's a little bit of a play on words, both of which work for this workshop. It is a 6 month long workshop. It'll be a small class. And the structure for the workshop will meet twice a month. And each month will have a different theme, which is related to a design element. So we're going to be covering color, line, shape, pattern and repetition, scale, and figure ground. So each month will have one of those topics. And I will present a lecture, and then there'll be an exercise related to that particular design element topic. And that's what we'll be doing in the first session of every month. In the second session of every month, we will have a guest speaker whose work is directly related to the design element that we will be exploring. There will be all of the components that you folks have come to know in a long format class from me, meaning we'll have the private Facebook group, we'll have peer posses, which are small cohorts that allow you to be accountable and share ideas and information outside of the actual classroom. We will have what I'm calling the quilt chat, which is just an hour-long conversation where we talk about whatever we want to. There'll be private consults with me. And then, of course, at the end, we'll have a big ta-da. So I'm hoping if you are out there and you're thinking, stitching towards discovery, that's scary. I'm not sure that I could do that. That maybe you would consider this class, which is more of a foundations class, and where we're going to learn all about design elements and improvisational quilt making combined together. All right, so that's one announcement. The second announcement is that Elizabeth and I are doing our first ever live retreat. And this retreat is happening at Art Nest, which coincidentally, a girlfriend of mine opened up this space. We've been friends since college. Her name's Tina Jackson. She is the owner of Art Nest, which is a retreat center. And we are having a live retreat there. The workshop is called Around the Bend, which is all about improvisational piecing. If you do sign up, in addition to when you pay for the retreat, you also get a free virtual circle and curve sampler workshop. It'll be a recording, or you can attend live. Either way, you will get that as a foundation to help you move into this class, which is composition designing with circles and curves. It's called Around the Bend. It's at Art Nest. Starts Tuesday evening, April 7th, and goes through Sunday at noon on April 12th. I will be your instructor. Elizabeth is going to be cooking for us, and she will also be your support. And that's a snapshot of the classroom there. Everybody has two tables that can be raised up and down. You have a design wall, you have ironing stations. It's gorgeous, gorgeous facility. And I really would love it if you would join us and make our first live retreat a success. Okay. The big ta-da. As I mentioned before, this is the big ta-da 2025. This is the fourth time we have had students present their work. What is Stitching Towards Discovery? Well, it's a 6-month-long seminar for students to actively work on new quilts. And the goal is for the students to sort of, through the practice of making new work, begin to develop their own quilt aesthetic, their own voice. And that happens through community, through prompts, through lectures, through discussions. And in the end, you have the big ta-da. So this is a quote that I use always at this in the big ta-da presentation, because I think it's so relevant to what these students have done. Nothing in the world can take the place of persistence. Talent will not. Nothing is more common than unsuccessful men with talent. Genius will not. Unrewarded genius is almost a proverb. Education will not. The world is full of educated derelicts. Persistence and determination alone are omnipotent. Calvin Coolidge. And that's what these students have exhibited is persistence, tenacity, a desire to be here today to share their work with you. And it's huge accomplishment. And I'm very proud of all of the students that are sharing their work today. The presentations are in alphabetical order. There are 9 presenters, and they all will be taking about 5 to 7 minutes to share their work. So we're going to start. The very first slide is always an image of the presenter, and that is their clue to unmic themselves, and Elizabeth will put the camera on them and they will share their work. I will be advancing the slides. students may tell me to advance the slides, or they may just pause briefly and then I will advance the slide. So we are ready for Patricia.
Hi, my name is Patricia Amburgy, and with my last name, I'm always the first to go in any kind of a lineup. I live in State College, Pennsylvania, which is a small town located in the middle of the state. After retiring from teaching at Penn State for many years, I took up quilting with a real passion. I discovered Maria's work early on, and I've taken a number of workshops with her over the last several years, including this one, Stitching Towards Discovery 2025. Recently, I also took How to Build a Quilt with Maria. In this workshop, she discusses various quilt structures, such as a medallion, a grid, off the grid, and other layouts. I created this small medallion quilt using leftovers from previous quilts I've made. I created this quilt with a grid structure, again using leftovers from previous quilts I've made. This quilt has an off-the-grid structure. Out of all the structures I've tried so far, I think this is my favorite. Except for a couple of coping strips, I created this quilt again with leftovers from previous projects. It has a bit of everything in it. In a sense, it's kind of a diary of my quilt making journey in the last several years. This quilt has a bar structure. I pieced it at the end of last year, Stitching Towards Discovery, as a record of the patterns I used in my quilts last year, and also as a record of my palette, which was purposefully pink. Looking back on it, I suppose this quilt could also be called another diary quilt. I pieced this quilt last year, and this year I've been using it to try out quilting designs with which I might finish some of my quilt tops. In the detail, you can see some of the designs I tried out. This year, I had hoped to finish quilting 6 quilts in Stitching Towards Discovery, but I only managed to finish 2. This is one of them. My artist statement for the quilt is as follows. Issues of power related to looking, who is being looked at, and who is doing the looking, have long been significant topics in art theory. In the 1970s, John Berger famously argued that Western art assumed a male viewer. In art, as in life, men typically did the looking while women were the ones being looked at. Thinking about this, I wondered how a more equitable relationship between men and women might be represented. This quilt is the result. The ones being looked at are looking back. This is another composition I finished quilting this year. It celebrates the Women's March on Washington in 2017 after the first time Donald Trump was elected president. I pieced the quilt last year in Maria's workshop called Under the Influence. The composition was inspired by news photographs of the 2017 Women's March, which showed a sea of pink pussy hats in the nation's capital. This composition, with a somewhat similar structure, is a quilt top I pieced this year. I made it to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the United States, which will be coming up in 2026. The buildings around the perimeter of the composition represent the 3 branches of government as set out in the United States Constitution. The Capitol building at the top represents the legislative branch. The Supreme Court building on the left represents the judicial branch, and the White House on the right represents the executive branch. The abstract people figures, excuse me, in the body of the composition represent the idea that our government rests on the people of the United States, not on kings, oligarchs, or dictators. The title of the quilt comes from the opening words of the U.S. Constitution. Under normal circumstances, the theme of this quilt would be a fairly ordinary idea. However, in the context of a president who wants to be a king, the quilt makes a political statement. In my next quilt, I will use the leftovers from We the People with this beautiful array of skin colors. I'm not sure yet about the composition. The ideas are still percolating, but I know the theme of my next quilt will be diversity, perhaps diversity, equity, and inclusion. I want to end with a heartfelt thank you to Maria, Elizabeth, and the other participants in this year's Stitching Towards Discovery. The last 6 months have been fabulous.
Hi, everybody. I'm Julie Caffey, and I don't know about you, but who wants to follow Patricia? That was so amazing. What that body of work, and it's really moving. So it's been so cool to be a part of this community, and working with Maria and the cohort of students in Stitching Towards Discovery. I also was in Promptopia. I come to quilting from a background in improvisational performance and basically interdisciplinary making. And I really bring a yes and approach to all of my making. And I started quilting a couple of years ago after retiring, and I had this long idea since my mom had passed. She had a lot of cashmere sweaters that I wanted to make a quilt out of cashmere sweaters. And so working with very sort of uncooperative, non-traditional material and just sort of diving in, I fell in love with the process and quickly became not interested in making the corners align. And my friends started feeding me wonderful improvisational quilters. And I just fell in love with materiality, and really so much of what I discovered this during this last 6 months, or rediscovered and affirmed, is just my own process, which is very embodied and very process oriented. So we could go to the next slide. Oh, am I controlling it, Maria? Sorry.
No, I do.
Oh, okay, cool. I just can't see. I can't see the slideshow, so I don't know what's being shown, but okay, I'll just carry on.
Well, you've got your first, I wonder why you can't see it. So,
So Julie, change your view,
yeah.
top right to speaker.
Okay, it is speaker. I can see myself. I can't see any slideshow.
Well, they're in the order that you sent me them. So I'll just give you little prompts. This first one is of the hat. And then
Okay.
you filleted the hat.
Okay. And so other people can see the slideshow. That's all I care about, right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, cool. Okay, so the first, one of the prompts in Stitching Towards Discovery was, if I were a quilt, what would I be? And so this quilt was, sorry, I got thrown and then nervous. So let me just pause for a second here.
Yeah, let's pause. I'm going to stop the share. And let's look at your view. Change your view. I don't know if that'll make a difference, Julie. If you could make sure your view is on speaker. Is that right, Elizabeth?
Yep. Yes.
Yeah, speaker, and I see you and me.
Okay,
That's
so now
what I
we're going to
see.
try it again, and we'll see if we get if you can see the screen, because normally you can see the screen.
Oh, there we are. Cool.
Okay, that will probably make
Fabulous.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so this quilt was, if I were a quilt, what would I be? And it was inspired by three dear friends. two friends of mine, the three of us, were basically meeting and contemplating the number 3. And in that contemplation, we got together at my place for a little mini retreat and went to Axeman and gave each other this playful assignment of gifts that we would incorporate into some body of work. One of us is a writer, primarily a writer. The other works in sculptural materials, and I was working with quilting. So I wanted to transform this hat and these gifts from my friends. And so here, I just wrote a little bit about it, and I started to abstract the numbers 3 in there and just kind of listening to what was happening here. Oh, someone's saying I cannot see her work. So maybe now only I can see the work.
So you're
No,
good. We focus on you.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Carry on.
So yes.
Okay, you can go on. And this, we could play this video. This is just a video of me just doing some hand quilting. I guess I wanted to show it in real time because we all have time lapse, but this is how slow it actually is. That was just 8 seconds. This is a detail. You could go back. Yeah. Just
We'll
how
go to the next one here as soon as I just am kind of amazed at all the protective gear that's on your fingers.
I know. I really learned a lot about, I experimented with every kind of thimble, every kind of covering, you name it, I tried it and ended up going through 10 boxes of Band-Aids. I really found Band-Aids were my favorite thing. And when you're working with alternative materials, trying to quilt with them is really pretty crazy. So that's a detail. And why this quilt is like me is it's a little bit wacky. It's a lot of listening. It's based in processing and really founded in relationship, and also layered ideas that may or may not be apparent to the viewer, and I'm okay with that they're abstracted in various ways. You can go. That's the piece. And I will just say this about quilt documentation. It sort of breaks my heart. And that's one of my goals for my future life in quilting is to do a better job of documenting, to really bring forward the essence of the quilt in more successful ways. Next. This is Wild Offspring, and I actually created this. I started this in Maria's Promptopia class, and it was based off an iconography prompt asking us to do a medallion quilt, which I didn't know what a medallion quilt. I wasn't sure what the traditional blocks were that one might more. So I just got to really research a lot and jump in. We were asked to work from 5 symbols that were meaningful to us. And so I had the hawk. This was really centered in my move here to Minnesota and this beautiful place that I live in where there's a hawk in my backyard and there's deer and in this piece, there's abstracted log cabins symbolizing home and these spirals, which for me, I use the symbol of spiral a lot, and I've used it as a doodling and deep listening tool. And it's been a wonderful challenge for me to try to incorporate that into my quilting life, which here is in a block. And then also I use the spiral when I do my hand quilting. I thought it would be fun to show just how this grew and this idea when we're improvising, like you just don't know when you're trying to like make shapes out of no templates, you're like, okay, well, let me try this, and let me try gray in the background, and let me try these little things. And so just seeing also proportionally, originally we had to be a minimum of 50 by 50, but when I made that first hawk, it was up in the left-hand corner. It was so big. I was like, okay, this is going to really be a big monster. And so then I was trying out this gray and this blue kept coming through, and you could see, I just wanted to show how I had to then go, oh, ditch the gray. And just the work that we all do when you're listening to, if you're just really saying yes, and you listen and it's like, okay, I guess I have to back up. And what was really, I really appreciated too, was part of, you know, jumping in, like improvisation is not necessarily only being messy. It's about saying yes, but also I was really challenged by Maria to like improve my piecing, and I've really grown a lot in that area. And these were challenging things to piece, and I went back and picked them out and did them over and over again to try to get it to lay flat. So. And these, why this is called Wild Offspring is just things kept growing out of things. And I was listening to the spiral. I was listening to these images that were coming out. And in here are little itty bitty log cabins using the 12 color palette that are in there. And I was just wanting to show how they were, the multiple ways I tried to piece it in. And finally, this is the completed quilt, and I was showing my war injuries there. I actually took one of the tips from Maria's hand quilting was using duct tape as a thimble. And I gave myself this wonderful launch to doing the hand quilting on this, which was to take a train trip to go see a quilter. I went to see Heidi, gosh, I'm drawing a blank on her name. Everybody knows her name, but Heidi's show down in Madison. She was having a residency at the Pfister Hotel, and I wanted to just do something to begin this quilting project because that's a 90 by 90 quilt, and I knew it was going to take a long time. If you're stitching in a straight line, it's going to be really different than doing circles, and I tracked this, and it took me 300 hours. And you could show this video. This is my cats helping me, my studio assistants, Alphabet and Betamax. And because some of the colors of the materials, like that peach right there was a very special material, it was particularly hard to pierce through. It was not traditional quilting cotton. So I've learned a lot about working with alternative materials. And also like pick a color that might be in a more cooperative material. You can move on. This last quilt is the working title is called Missing Kim, and it is I took a class with Tara Fonin called Block Studies, and her block was called Abstractions, and we were given a palette to work with. And I was taking this class concurrently with Promptopia, and then it started into Stitching Towards Discovery. And I, at the same time as I was working on these blocks, our dear friend Kim died in a tragic car accident. And you can go on to the next slide. And so I started, I didn't realize, I thought I started more process. It's okay, I'll just talk. So I started just hand piecing because I really wanted to be quiet, and making with the machine is a kind of like very energetic, wild energy that I have when I'm working in that way. And working with my hands and slowing down and just doing hand piecing, which surprised me because I was like, okay, hand piecing, really? These little fiddly things, because they are really little and fiddly. But I really wanted to slow down and go at the speed of the body, and be with the winter and with my wife, who also is experiencing this deep loss of this beloved friend and in our community. And meanwhile, also what was happening in the country was like multidimensional in its how emotional and full we felt. And so it felt really good to just be doing this really quiet, slow thing that I didn't know how it would accumulate. And so this is almost finished. I've got pieces that are coming around, and it's about, I'd say 85% hand piece and the rest is machine piece. It was funny because my last thing with Maria was I said, I don't know if I can break out of hand piecing. I'm just in this zone. And she's like, well, just put 2 pieces of material together and start your sewing machine. And I'm back at it, and it's really a lot of fun. And it feels really good to be moving through that grief and processing that, and that we have an art form that can hold those kinds of things, and that we also then get to bring it into the world, and it can be in such a it could be such a useful thing if you want it to be. Thank you. And I really want to thank this beautiful community of makers, your boldness and vulnerability, and the array of the way people make work and approach has been really inspiring. And Maria and Elizabeth have been just wonderful. Thank you.
Well, that snuck up on me. Am I unmuted?
Yes, you are ready to go, Sandy.
Okay, I couldn't hear myself. All right. I am Sandy Goodwin, and my husband and I recently moved to Piney Flats, Tennessee, to be closer to our grandchildren. There's one, and their parents, of course. I was reluctant to present here, as I'm pretty sure I was the least productive student. I have only one small top finished, but Maria encouraged me to participate, suggesting that others may learn from my story and be encouraged to jump in. I learned a lot about improv, more about the process, and even more about myself. Sorry, trying to not be nervous. Hopefully what I have learned will help me in my journey forward towards being a better quilter. We were still unpacking from our move when I saw Maria's email in December in advertising STD. I hoped it would incentivize me to finish setting up my studio, as well as give me some structure and accountability. My goals for the workshop were to establish a regular studio practice and to find my voice. I need to trust that I have a voice and that art quilting is a valid pursuit. I did not realize at the time how hard improv would be. As a graphic designer, I knew what elements I had to incorporate. Thus, improv is terrifying because it's completely wide open. One of the most valuable takeaways was developing rules for myself will make it easier. I've been quilting for about 11 years, more modern than traditional, but definitely not improv. My former guild, the Charleston Modern Quilt Guild, arranged Zoom workshops with Tara Fonen and Daisy Aushog. We hosted Lizzie House workshop and traveled to Beaufort to take a class with Sherry Lynn Wood. I've taken several online classes with Maria, as well as Cindy Grisdella and David Owens Hastings. And from all of these workshops, I have not one finished quilt, lots of pieces. I've learned a lot of techniques though. I love improv, but I've never really applied myself to figuring out how I could do it myself in my own voice. Perfectionism, fear, and indecisiveness are the main stumbling blocks to my productivity. Perfect is paralyzing. These are so far my improv quilts. The one in the green log cabins was from 2015, and that's a big mess that I've not revisited. The second one I kind of like, it's a dress form study. I actually finished it. That little piece of fabric was the Inspire. And then I like to do the made fabric, but that's gone nowhere either. And then I did the improv crosses. I love Caffey and batiks together, but that's unsuccessful, I think, because I didn't know then that one thing to do is to like make the colors work with the other blocks. So now with a design wall, I think I could do better with that, and I'm going to try that again. The improv trees were a lot of fun. I'm sure I used a ruler. And the improv crosses with Marcia Durst fabric, too bland, not enough contrast. And then the piece on the right is based on it was a challenge in our guild. And that was based on some art that I saw, and I enjoyed doing it, but a hand quilter I will never be. I'll leave that to you, Julie. Okay. So I had a really hard time getting started in STD. There were too many choices, and I'm so indecisive. I had not developed a process to approach the prompts, so while I had lots of ideas, none of them were realized. I plan to re-listen to all of the wonderful speakers as well as referring to the notes I took during class so I can come up with a process that works for me. I took a Cindy Grisdella class in January and had some blocks I made in that. I took Maria's Circles and Curves workshop and had a bunch of blocks from that one too. The most useful workshop I've ever taken was Maria's How to Build a Quilt. I highly recommend that to anyone new to improv. It taught me how to approach improv and helped me to finish my quilt top. Ta-da. So the last class was behind me and I still did not have a finished top. Using what I had learned in how to build a quilt, I gathered what I had and made a bunch more pieces and ended up with this little quilt top, which I do not hate. While I did not achieve any of my goals, my studio is still a work in progress. I've not yet established a regular studio practice, and I have not found my voice. I am much farther along in all of those areas since January. I want to thank Maria for her encouragement and kindness and incredible talent for teaching. The syllabus was amazing. The guest lecturers all inspiring. Thanks to Elizabeth for her amazing organizational talents. She makes all things run smoothly. And thank you, Stacey, my posse partner, for your support in trying to keep me on track, kind of like herding cats. And what a talented group of quilters in the class. I learned so much from all of you and commend you for your bravery in sharing your work with the class. And a huge thanks to Julie for hosting a weekly Zoom drop-in for anyone who is available. What a gift. It was a place to socialize and support each other and learn. I have signed up for Promptopia and am off to a much better start thanks to what I have learned over the past 6 months. I am looking forward to working with my Promptopia posse, Jackie and Susan, who are also fellow STD alums. Thank you so much.
Hi, my name's Stephanie Jurgensen. I'm from Boston, Massachusetts, and true confessions, it's my second go around at Stitching to Discovery, and Sandy, no fear, I spent this Stitching to Discovery trying to finish tops from the last Promptopia. So, you know, progress is progress, and I'm happy to be able to share a few completions today. I'm a relatively new quilter, about 5 years, and I'm still looking for my voice, but I'm really enjoying, you know, the explorations and the learnings and going through this process, especially with all your fellow classmates. This first piece here was part of the Promptopia course, and the Promptopia was all about design constraints, which can actually be freeing and loosen you up to actually do something instead of having all options open. And one of the key things here was 4 quadrants and take 3 objects and manipulate them in through the 4 quadrants. And the quadrants brought my mind to my other love, which is tennis, hence the name here, Grand Slams, and the theme. Obviously, the objects were tennis themes, and the color themes were for the 4 different Grand Slam tournaments. And this is a lesson in piecing to a precise object. So not so much in the improv spirit, but was not really using rulers. I did use some templates for some of the curve things. But I look forward to maybe doing some hand quilting and embellishing with some references to the 4 famous tournaments. This was another Promptopia construction, and here the objective was to use a column structure with some very specific rules on where color placement had to occur. And maybe as a hint to my resistance to exercises, my first thought was like, how can I hide the columns? So I proceeded to basically take color scraps from the tennis theme quilt, and I started playing around making these bars and strip pieces. I think making a strip quilt is a rite of passage for any improv quilter, and this might be one of many to come. But I enjoyed this, and I did construct it as columns, but I think they are successfully sort of disguised as well. And interestingly, if you rotated it 90 degrees, it would also still meet the criteria, but you would see columns then. This also was a Promptopia completion, and in this case, we were challenged to look around our surroundings and find something patterned to inspire us to make a quilt. And I think I'm, similar to, I don't know if it's a famous quote or someone had stickers like, I see quilts everywhere. I'm definitely one of those people. And in this case, it was a humble utility road cover in Rome. And part of the challenge was monochromatic palette and a V structure. And I noticed after looking closer at the photograph that this simple grid of squares had morphed into diamonds halfway around the little grid there. So that inspired me and led me to work on this, where I also pulled in use of my upcycled materials, to use a lot of striped fabrics and men's shirts. And in the course of working on this, I also discovered there's a whole website where you can research manhole covers, which there's very many interesting designs out there for manhole covers. This piece was prompted by place as a prompt or location, and also inspired by me. I'm quite an admirer of the work of Jan Arthus Bertrand, a photographer who did a lot of work from aerial shots, where you get a unique perspective on kind of everyday objects or locations. So I was inspired by visits to Sorrento, the Amalfi Coast, and common in the Riviera. You can see these small stretches of beaches that are just crammed with umbrellas. And then there's many, many aerial photos of that. And I explored an octagon shape, which can be classically pieced in the spider web pattern. And I also played with it in a different way, where you just piece wedges together and put corners on them and work with them as squares. But it was very challenging to, combine these different shapes and get them all to fit together, and then build the ocean with the strips. And I'm saying that the pointy objects lurking in the water are a slight nod to the 50th anniversary of Jaws, which is this year. And then what's next for me? Continuing in, I think, my love of pattern and repetition and classic blocks, I stumbled across a quilt for sale online, and rather than buy it, I decided to kind of try to deconstruct the block and recreate it. And I also then made that into my commitment to the 100-day challenge this year, which started in February, so kind of ran concurrently. And I am now looking forward to piecing this into a full top. One of the big lessons here was Y seams, and I'm pretty comfortable with them now at a block scale, but I will think they'll be quite a challenge when I'm managing a whole quilt top. But I will give it my best. I have stacks and stacks of these blocks to work with now. And I just want to also echo everyone else and say thank you, to Maria and Elizabeth. It's just really a great process going through this. Your teaching and guidance and the feedback that you give is really invaluable. And then the other dimension is, the speakers are great too, but working with all the other students, seeing them grow and having all the interactions. Shout out again to Julie for our Zoom gatherings. It's really a fantastic experience, and I highly recommend it to anyone. Thank you.
There we go. I'm here. Okay, I'm Stacey Reece. I'm from Richmond, Virginia, or a suburb, Midlothian, which is right outside of Richmond. I'm pretty daggone new to quilting, lifelong oil painter, really only been quilting for 2 years, really still looking for my voice. But I will say I love stitching towards discovery. Um, I managed to finish 5 quilts, but I learned so much more. Not sure I found my voice yet, and you're going to see that by the kind of scattered approach, but I think that's part of the process. So we can go to the first quilt. This is starting blocks. This is the first quilt that I completed. I was overwhelmed with possibilities after our first stitching towards discovery meeting. I finally decided to get started with the simplest of ideas, and the simplest of construction, which was a take on one shape, no filter. I realize there's more than squares in there, but they're squares. And a limited palette, which everyone by now knows, black, white, and gold. So I was then able to put them together in a composition that I thought was successful, and I used matchstick quilting on this piece. Counted that as done. So next. I need to thank my posse mate Sandy for a lot of things, but she really helped me with this. I had made a giant wonky log cabin just to get something on my machine with, my favorite colors, my favorite fabrics. She suggested using it as a start of my next quilt. So I made a series of wonky log cabins using the same rule, darks on two sides, lights on the others. One of our lecturers, Susan Lapham, talked about the usefulness of giving yourself rules. And I love this technique. When I went to piece the quilt together, my rule was to orient all the darks towards the inside of the quilt. And I think this really helped create an interesting composition. Funnily enough, I tried to square this piece up without losing a lot of the information, and I just couldn't do it. But I decided to embrace that the quilt itself could mirror the wonky log cabins inside of it. Next, ball drop. I'm going to confess that I think that this is the least successful of the quilts that I've done, but that's fine. This quilt was in part inspired by our Bauhaus design prompt and Bridget Riley. I love the black and white curves that are present in both. I felt like the curves needed a place to land and use these pearl-like blocks I had been working on. I wanted to add some harsher geometric lines to balance the curves at the top. It wasn't until the quilt was completed that I decided that it looked like balloons and streamers dropping on a party, thus ball drop. Next. So I created this quilt because Sandy and I were talking about fabrics we loved, and I was determined to use the fabric you see inside the figure, which is a bunch of female figures, in an impactful way. I used the techniques I learned in Maria's Big Botany class to first create a sketch, then a 2-scale template, and finally piecework to put the quilt together. Once I saw the completed top, I thought that the organic nature of it really demanded hand quilting. So I used pearl cotton and got to work. You can't see, but there are seed stitches in every one of those tiny figures. I added gold French knots as an embellishment. I also love how the back came out. So next slide. I also used one of the links that we had to create these labels. So I didn't mean to put it exactly on her private parts, but there you go. Okay. My final quilt, this is probably my favorite, honestly. I was inspired by a collage artist whose work frequently uses black and white stripes. Again, my favorite. I gave myself rules. I used my first quilt starting blocks as a jumping off point. So it's the same size square that you see in my first quilt. I would only use squares and limit my palette. I grouped the black and white units together and the colored units together. I also wanted to use negative space, in it as an element of the quilt. I decided to quilt this piece using a lilac thread and more organic lines. I love how it turned out, and I think it looks like a greenway running through an urban environment. This is a quilt that I can see going on to make variations of, and that's the way I'm going to challenge myself going forward. I want to thank Maria and Elizabeth for an amazing experience, and also thank my posse mate Sandy. She really helped me hone in on my ideas, and we had a lot of fun in our meetings. I really hope to see more of you guys in the future. It was fun.
Hi, everyone. My name is Susan Skatoff, and this is very difficult because I am at the end of the alphabet or close to it. I believe there's at least one other person after me, but all of my classmates are so amazing, and I'm so moved by all of their work. It's really wonderful. So thank you to everyone. So one of the things that happens actually, let me say, this is my second time in Stitching Towards Discovery. And one of the elements of class is that we learn about different artists. I had never thought about artists in other fields. As a new quilter, I haven't been doing this very long, only a little under 5 years. And in the first Stitching Towards Discovery, Maria brought up an artist named Sean Scully, who I had never heard of, and challenged us to do a little research on him and look into his work, which I did. And then I think after that, it was Helen Frankenthaler. And that really lit a fire in me to explore different artists that I was not familiar with. And in that exploration, I discovered an artist by the name of David Smith. He was a sculptor, American sculptor, working in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s, part of the abstract expressionist movement. So you're probably more familiar with his buddies, which would be like Helen Frankenthaler, Jackson Pollock, William de Kooning, Elaine de Kooning, names like that. Anyway, I got really interested in the idea of sculpture as being similar to quilting, even though that, of course, is three-dimensional and with typically hard objects, nothing like fabric, of course, and yet both are unforgiving elements, right? This isn't like paint. This isn't watercolor. It's not drawing. You can't erase. And so this time in Stitching Towards Discovery, I thought I'd explore sculpture and incorporate that into quilting. So this piece is called Overflow. It's inspired by one of David Smith's series, which is called oh my gosh, my words. I'm the one who's losing the words, Julie. The Tank Totem series. He referred to all of his sculptures as personages, and they were very people-like, and he would actually move them around his property and take pictures of them and literally have like picnics with them. So in this piece, I mirrored one of his works and did it strictly in black and white. I never worked in simply two colors before, which is, on the one hand, of course, liberating because you only have two colors. And on the other hand, it's extremely challenging, or was so for me, because there's nowhere to hide. So all of your piecing becomes very important. And the balance of the different tones, the only two tones that you have, also becomes incredibly important. As you can see, the quilt is not yet quilted, and I do think that's going to be the third part of this. I think the quilting is going to add a really make or break element to this, and so I will come back with it quilted and show it to everyone. And then the other final thing in working with black and white is that the seams become part of the story in a way that in another quilt, in another composition, they may not. So I was very attentive to where my seams were because you can really see them. It's harder in this photo, but in real life, because of the white, you can really see where the seams are at, and they're all very intentional. So this next quilt is called Where to Begin. And again, I'm still working with the idea of David Smith and his sculptures in my mind, very geometric, not an organic sculptor, not, this is not the Roman form of a woman or anything like that. Everything with him was very hard and industrial. So one of the prompts, or not prompts, but one of the challenges this year was to get scraps perhaps from somebody in class, which I was able to do. I got a bag of scraps from Jackie too when I was driving down 95 after picking up my daughter at university. And this is what came out of the bag of scraps. So what scraps, using someone else's scraps taught me is that it's sort of wonderful to start with other people's pieces. She had some elements that were already sewn, so that was great. That saved me work. It was like having a cake mix ready to go. And that restriction of just having her pre-cut pieces was really freeing. It wasn't the same as looking at yards of fabric stacked, I emptied this bag, I ironed things out and threw it up on the wall and then started building stuff around it, and really got lost in it this summer, just really enjoyed playing with the colors and the concepts of moving the half circles around and the squares and playing with the geometry of it and trying to trick you a little bit on where I started, where I finished, and where your eye should really end up in this one. So I did not have the world's most productive summer. However, I have two other works in progress that I'm really excited about. Again, still very much inspired by David Smith's work. This one is called Sentinel. David Smith did a series called The Sentinels. Again, they're all anthropomorphized steel sculptures. And he painted a lot of his sculptures. So in this piece, I wanted to work again with sort of echoing a human form in there, but this time using color as opposed to the first quilt you saw with the black and white. I'm 90% there. Almost got it stitched up, but not quite yet. And I like the chunkiness of this one. Again, this is all just exploring new avenues for me in terms of piecing. So this last piece, another work in progress, again, playing with the ideas of pattern falling apart, right? The predictability of a pattern. You can see there's half square triangles sort of towards the top, and they sort of shatter as things go down. We had a lot of conversations about 6-minute circles in this group. And so I threw some of those guys in there too and played with them. What if they were kind of bobbling along through this mess of what was going on in the background, and then playing with techniques, inserting different pieces into the quilt. So this one's almost done too, but like I said, not quite. I can't call it a complete work. So I think the most important thing that I experienced this year in Stitching Towards Discovery, and I should say last year as well, I made a very good friend in my first year of Stitching Toward Discovery, Patty Vallis, who is in Promptopia this year. This is me and Julie and Jackie, because isn't it normal for three people who've never met to take a trip to Nebraska to go to the International Quilt Museum and see an exhibit of Nancy Crow's student work? And that's what happens in classes with Maria. You make friends through the posse format. You have somebody like Julie who says, hey, I'll throw up a Zoom on Tuesdays and anyone can join. And the next thing you know, you're chatting and chatting. And then the next thing you know, you're on a flight to Nebraska, the most wonderful 2 days with these ladies. And truly, their friendship is the ultimate prize for me for stitching toward discovery. And I would encourage anyone who's thinking about taking one of these long format classes to understand that of course, it's about the quilting, and of course, it's about learning techniques and things like that. But you will never be able to learn what you will learn from the other students in the class anywhere else, and you will develop relationships that you will not anywhere else. And I'm so very grateful to Maria and Elizabeth for creating that platform for all of us. And I look forward to Promptopia I'm partnered with Sandy and Jackie. And Sandy, you are ahead of the game because it sounds like you're further along than me, but I'm looking forward to more adventures ahead. And thank you again to everyone so much for your support.
Hello? Can you hear me? Oh, yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Okay, hi, everybody. I'm Cheryl St. Germaine. I'm in Savannah, Georgia, though I've traveled all over the world. I'm from New Orleans. This is a picture of me with my 6-month-old grandson, who I love very much. And I have really loved seeing everyone's work, but you're going to see that I do something very, very different. In fact, I told Maria about halfway through the class that I'm kind of going to stick with my surface design stuff, but I did do some piecing. I do think of myself as a minimalist, and I think that's because I spent my life as a poet and learned how to say as much as I can with as few words as I can. So I love dyeing and printing my own fabric, and I try to do with that what you all do with piecing. But you'll see, especially in this first piece, I did do some piecing, and I did do something that wasn't exactly minimalist. So the next piece. So this was from a prompt that Maria gave us to use one shape in the entire quilt. So this is all hand-dyed fabric that I just had lying around in my studio. I wanted to just really focus on trying to get these triangle shapes in here. So it was really a lot of fun just trying to get these. I guess maybe this is upside down. Maybe I sent it upside down, but I would see it as a real triangle in the middle with it reversed. And I also like to have emotional resonances in my quilts. And so this is actually the icon from an Alcoholics Anonymous chip. If you know what those look like, there's always a triangle on it. So next one. So this was also from a prompt that Maria gave about if you made a quilt that looked like you, what would it look like? And so I did so many mock-ups. I worked really hard in this class. I finished all 5 quilts, and I probably have half a dozen that I started and couldn't finish. And in this case, I had so many ones that I thought, oh, I'm going to put jazz in here. I'm going to put all this color. I'm going to do New Orleans. But then Gray kept coming in, and that was my son's name, Gray. And some of you know, I talked about this. He died 10 years ago of a drug overdose. And so I thought, okay, this is what this is about. This is about my life with him. And so I do a lot with earth minerals, painting with them. And so this is not the colored strip in the middle, but the black and the gray is done with earth minerals. And I love the way that that earth minerals, depending on how you put them on the fabric, they're different the tones are different. And so I hope that this quilt shows a kind of richness in the gray. And then in my mind, it's also the colored strips, some of which are earth minerals and some of which are Procyon dye, thickened dyes. I hope it shows that there was joy and possibility and promise. And then of course the black, and this is linen, this is almost all linen, sort of suggests to me a life cut short. I did not quilt this, but I stretched it on a canvas. So yeah, that's how that's presented. So this is a triptych. It took, I must have worked on this for 2 months, thinking about, I wanted to get, after working on the one with my son, I wanted something really different. And so since I mentioned, I come from New Orleans, I love jazz, I love improvisational jazz, and this is called Jazzed, and it's, the one on the panel on the left is a whole cloth, as the one on the right is whole cloth. The one in the middle is gently pieced. The keyboard is pieced in there. And there are many layers of paint and dye. And on here I've used thermophaxes and screens, and it's hand quilted. And I've also used I like to have writing sometimes on my quilt, or things that look like writing, to sort of honor my life as a writer. So I use these bottlenecks that I put thickened dye in and just make little squiggly marks. And I was listening to jazz the whole time that I was doing this, a trio. And so I hope that the improvisation got in it in some way, and that you can see the rhythm and the music and the color in it. And I wanted to make it a triptych because I thought about how in jazz songs, there's always a solo, the drummer takes a solo, the keyboardist takes a solo, and the bassist, and yet they all work together. So yeah, there's that. So different one. This is also hand dyed. This is linen and cotton. And I was thinking about Nancy Crow's always talking about, why don't people use brown, and so I worked in her class. I tried to use brown as a foil against other colors. It was a lot of fun, but in this case, I wanted to evoke my mother's journals. My mother, before she died, she was in intensive care, and I found that she had kept a journal all of her life. In fact, there were 50 journals. And I started reading them, and it was so painful. And sometimes she was talking about, she felt she had to choose between suicide and alcoholism. And it was just, and then things that she wrote as a sexual woman, with regrets about my father and regrets about the children. It was so painful that I kept reading. And so I wanted to make a quilt that evoked that. I don't know if anyone will ever want to see this quilt, but I have it hanging up in my living room. And it's torn. And in fact, if you lift up the bottom, I didn't attach the bottom, you'll find more writing. And the writing that's on here, I took from her journal. Originally, I had transferred actual pages from the journal. Then I thought, she is going to come back and haunt me if I put her actual journal on there. But anyway, this is sewn onto a mat and framed. And yeah, it's the feeling of reading my mother's journal. And this was a real exploration. It's a technique that I learned from Ann Johnston that involves taking a piece of cloth and crinkling it up, and then getting a roller and just kind of rolling different colors on, opening it up, putting different rollers. And I was thinking again about my son. I was thinking about his ashes, which I have some of, and what they look like. And so that's what I meant to do with this piece. And I would have used Procyon MX dyes, but it's very hard for me to get the right kind of grays with that. So I decided to use acrylic. And then I hand stitched it. So I'll never do that again, because you can kind of see in this piece. I could make an excuse for it, but it is kind of lumpy. It's got little bumps in it. And that's because the acrylic makes it kind of rubbery, and it's very, very hard to get it to be straight. So I'm glad that I did it. And I've since then I've made a lot of more other pieces with blues and reds and I think some beautiful pieces that use the Procyon MX dyes. So that's where I am, and I have really loved this class, even though I haven't participated live a lot. I listened to everything. I went to a couple of Julie's meetings. I really enjoyed, everything that I learned in the class I highly recommend it to people. I'm going to move on I'm working on a project called Reliquaries, where I'm taking images of objects that mean a lot to me, that when I die, my daughter may just throw away. And I write a poem about it, and then I build a quilt around the image of that. So I've got about 13 of those, and I hope to do a book of that and a show. So that's where I am now. So thank you, Maria. Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, everyone else.
Janet, you're good.
Okay. I'm good. All right. So my name is Janet Tranburgger. About 18 months ago, I moved to Portland, Oregon. And so about a year ago, I signed up for Promptopia, figuring that I wanted to meet some new people and challenge myself to try some new things with Maria. This is a quilt of mine called Sunrise, Sunset, or that was the prompt for it. I called it Sun Up, Sundown, and it was hanging in the Museum of the Visions in San Diego at the time. Next, this is the first quilt I made in Promptopia. It was called Around the Bend. I learned a lot from these classes. I learned how to pick palettes a different way, and I learned about different kinds of piecing. And I got different ideas for layouts of things. And when I got to this, I tried different kinds of quilting. Maria quilts everything one color and then moves on to a different color of thread. And that's what I did with this at the beginning of Stitching Towards Discovery. Next. This was also made in Promptopia. And again, I quilted it during this class, trying to get some things finished. During Promptopia, I made 6 quilts. 3 of them are totally finished. 3 of them are still tops. Next. Stitching Towards Discovery, one of the prompts was lines. I had thought about the possibility of whether or not I could make these curved pieces, which are they start off with just 2 colors. In this case, black and white. And usually they're stacked on top of each other, and then the curves meld into each other. But I wanted to just make them across the quilt. I planned on doing more to it, but the quilt told me it was done at this point, so I stopped. The next one was for the prompt Bauhaus. I have quilted this one as well, all the way. I really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun, and it's bright colors, which I really like to do. And I reverted to my own method of picking a palette, one color at a time. The next one, oh, okay. This was also part of Promptopia. It was called Get in Shape. And it's my favorite one of all the ones I've made. I have not quilted it yet. I'm waiting for it to tell me how it wants to be quilted, because they all kind of talk to me eventually at some point. Next. And this is the last quilt I made for Stitching Towards Discovery. The idea was to take scraps from somebody else and make it, but I don't believe there's anyone else in the class that's on this coast. So I just went through the scraps I had left over from Promptopia and other places, and a bin I have of black and white constructed things, and put this together. There's 5 pieces that are hexagons were left over from Promptopia when we were supposed to do a quilt called Superstar. And I made these and decided they just were not working for me. And I also came up with the idea that I wanted to try to make spirals. So I started with the one up in the left-hand corner, and then I tried a triangle, and then I tried a square to see what I could do. They're a little bit tricky because you have to go with unfinished seams before you finish going around. And Stitching Towards Discovery, I made 6 quilts, and then 6 tops, and then I combined 2 of them into one. So I still have, there's another one that's finished. There's 3 of them total finished, and I have 2 more to quilt and 3 more from the other. I want to thank Maria and Elizabeth, and my peer posse, Jane and Mary from Promptopia. And I especially want to thank Julie for her Zoom setup that we enjoy once a week. It's been fun to talk to all of you. It's nice to have made some new friends. And I encourage everybody to take these classes. You learn a lot about yourself. I've learned new ways to lay out a quilt. I've learned new ways to quilt quilts. And you'll be amazed at the things you'll learn. Take it away.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. My name is Jackie Tu, and I live in Richmond, Virginia. And I will say that I first learned about Stitching Towards Discovery in October of 2024 when Maria taught her Circles and Curves workshop at my local guild. And I will admit that I had some serious doubts about whether I belonged in this class. Maria shared some of the incredible work of past students, and I think it triggered a wave of imposter syndrome. But, instead of kind of backing away, I dove headfirst in with a big push from Maureen, who is a previous STD student. So thanks for the push, Maureen. In the past 6 months, you've pushed me in ways I didn't expect. And although I've been quilting for many years more traditionally, I've only started to explore improv quilting about a year or so ago. And I'm deeply grateful to Maria, Elizabeth, and my classmates for creating such an inspiring and supportive environment. So Game of Improv, I chose to share this piece. I completed it in January after taking a class that Maria teaches. And the concept is really about, you have a fixed color palette based on letters in your name. The exercise challenges us to create units based on the spinning of a wheel that dictates the shape, size, and color. And for me, I wanted to share this because it's an exercise in letting go of control. And, that can be liberating in a way. And I really embraced the, I guess I'll say randomness and leaned into the creative constraints that came out of that class. It really kind of set the tone for the rest of my journey. So the monthly prompts help push me to see things differently, to think about how I approach my work, to sketch more, to find inspiration in everyday moments. And I was especially drawn, the first prompt included Bridget Riley and her work and her use of color and black and white to craft, visual rhythm. It really resonated with me. And so for this piece, I worked exclusively with triangles, which becomes a theme for me, experimenting with their dynamic potential. And while there's things that I would tweak now, I love that, it was kind of my first dive into this world of color and triangular forms. So that kind of translated into, month 2, where I think month 1, I was completely overwhelmed. But by month 2, I was able to set some clear goals, and really I set out to explore my artistic voice, experiment boldly, work in a series, and really invest in myself. I have a very full-time job. I've got 2 children, 8 and 9, and, a husband. And so I have life outside of, all of this. And I think the intention really led me, to an incredible mentor who's helped me realize the value of working in a series, among many other things. I'm very much so inspired by the one shape, no filler prompt that we had, and I chose the triangle. The triangle is strong, directional. There's infinite, kind of versatility or possibilities in that. And so I played with repetition, rotation, scale, to explore the tension between, order and change, how each triangle's placed. Some of it's intentional, some of it's that it just kind of fit there. It's just kind of open to interpretation. So you just are left to wonder, is it moving forward? Is it kind of falling apart? Is it building? Is it unraveling? And so I find it inviting to sit here and kind of pause to think about the balance of the structure of how all of that could happen through the simplicity of one shape. Riffing on Tradition was created during a QuiltCon class, so that was back in February, and with Maritza Soto. And the challenge really was to work within the limitations of just one traditional block. And so I selected the 8-point star, more triangles, and used scale, color, and scraps to kind of reimagine it in a new way. And it really helped me, or reminded me, of how much can come from narrowing your focus and letting creativity unfold within boundaries. And then last but not least, I'm calling this series Geometric Drift because it really explores the space between structure and impermanence. And so in this piece in particular, I keep referring to them as bubbles, but there's bubbles encased with sharp triangular forms, and they're symbols of whether it's order or logic floating within fluid and kind of this organic motion. And so for me, it reflects this kind of quiet transformation. I'm reaching a milestone birthday here soon, but, I think about the evolution of myself over time, and, kind of how ideas or identities or how things shift over time. With geometry, it's not fixed, things kind of drift. And this one, I think, breathes and it softens, with the bubble, but it still has a little bit of an edge, like its creator. And so, through that interplay, it's a exploration of rigid structures and how they can evolve, and where the beauty often lies in between. So I just want to thank Maria. Your guidance and your generosity for sharing your wisdom this year has been great. Susan, my mentor, I'm indebted to you. Thank you for everything you do to help push me and support me. I've had a wonderful peer posse this year. Susan, Kim, Kunyi, you've really been an inspiration, and amazing cheerleaders. And Julie, while I wasn't able to make all your open sows, I think you fostered a really supportive environment. So it's been an incredible group of artists with this class. I leave with greater confidence and something even more valuable, a really beautiful circle of friends. So thank you.
Thank you all. Elizabeth, I don't know how hard it is to turn off the mute so that people can maybe clap for everyone. And, it's...
Everybody can clap.
Yes. Okay. Yes. It is always so great to have this final presentation. It is the big ta-da. It is the moment where we get to see the body of work that you've made. And there's just something really special about that. And I appreciate that all of you worked so hard and then did this last step of putting together these portfolios to share with the world. This presentation will exist on my YouTube channel. It'll probably take me a day, maybe 2 days to get it up on YouTube. And I hope to see all of you in the future. And those of you who have never taken one of these classes, I hope you're inspired to maybe give it a go. So thank you all. And I hope to see you in person and online.